Monotype. Welcome to Creative Characters from Monotype, a show where we meet the people designing the future of creative work and shaping our culture. I'm Bill, and this is Carl, and we are your hosts.
Hey Bill, what's up?
Not too much, Carl. We're here for episode 10.
We are.
We did it. We hit double digits.
Yeah, we're back. We took a little midsummer break, but we are back, and with a good one, I would add.
Well, what's great about today's episode is that, we talk about this a lot here at Monotype, that type is so pervasive that sometimes even designers don't realize all the places that it intersects with your day-to-day life. And today's episode really dives deeply into an element of our lives that is so important to us and possibly overlooked, which is transportation. And not only do we have a great guest that is an expert in the value of type in transportation, we also have a first-time host who really understands the kind of the stylistic choice and the function of type and how it needs to work in helping us get around.
Yeah, this week's guest is Hannelore Ocampo. She is the fonts lead and type specialist at the Ford Motor Company. So she is right there on the front lines of developing new infotainment and sort of user interface systems in modern automobiles. And she is especially focused on the typography angle of it and the readability of these screens and these heads-up displays that are now prevalent in cars. And our host is making his debut on Creative Characters as Creative Type Director Terrance Weinzierl, who, in addition to being an extremely talented type designer, is also kind of a big car guy. And the two of them get into some pretty interesting topics around not just current car design and what's involved in creating a safe and also appealing in-car experience, but where the future of car ownership is going and what it's going to be like to drive a car in 5 or 10 years. And the reality is that both now and in the future, type is right at the center of it, because with screens becoming more common and more, almost more just expected, the legibility of the type on those screens needs to be precise so that you are, glancing quickly, ascertaining what you need to understand and getting your eyes back on the road. And even as cars become autonomous and do more for you, there's still going to be a certain level of attention required of the driver that can't be diverted for long periods of time. So type is really going to be at the center of this evolution as cars become more and more self-driving. And it's going to be really exciting to see.
It's hard to think of many industries that have evolved as much or as rapidly as transportation. And whether you're talking about autonomous vehicles, you're talking about electric vehicles, the creative assets that are required to function to create a really solid experience in car, they might be different. And so I think, between Terrance and Hanne, they bring a really rich perspective on where things have been, where they are now, and where they are going.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So let's turn it over to Terrance and Hanne and see what they have to say. And listeners, I hope you enjoy the episode.
Hello, welcome to Creative Characters podcast from Monotype. My name is Terrance Weinzierl, and I am a creative type director. And I'm going to be joined today by Hannelore Ocampo, who is a fonts lead and type specialist at Ford. Hi, Hanne. Thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you, Terrance, for inviting me.
So why don't you tell me about yourself, Hanne, and tell me a little bit about your background, how you got into type, and how you got this job.
I'm a graphic designer. I'm specialized in typography and in multi-script language support. That's the thing that I do the most. So I have focused all my projects and expertise in digital media, applications, UX, UI, web. And just like you said, I currently work at Ford Motor Company in a section called HMI, that is Human Machine Interface. Or in other words, I focus on the correct displayment of text in vehicle screens from a functional and an aesthetic perspective. And if you ask me, how did I get here? It was a bit of everything, I think. Ford was having so much trouble in regard of text. Globalization is coming, new languages, new support that you have to give now to more people. And they decided, hey, let's just bring somebody that it's specifically type design. And that's it.
Yeah.
So Ford was looking for somebody, and they come up with the idea of, hey, let's look in universities that are giving these specialties. So I studied my postgraduate type design, and the school where I studied here in Mexico, the last project that I did was about how typography could work in music and music notation. The university gave Ford my number and my contact. So they had a need, and they connected the dots, and then they talked to me, and that's it. That's how I am right now
Yeah.
in Ford Motor Company.
It's cliche, but everyone says there's no such thing as luck. It's this, combination of being prepared and having an opportunity. And that sounds like that's what it was.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a car fan myself. Of course, my mom is from Detroit, and I've lived in Michigan for most of my life. And so in Michigan, cars are like a big effing deal, right? It's a big deal.
Yeah.
And Ford is a big deal too, here especially. And so I think even just in my office, besides the type specimens, I have model cars behind me too. I have a little Lego Mustang back there. But what I love about cars and what makes me a fanboy is that I think they are like a masterpiece of industrial design. They are this combination of thousands of sculptures and engineering and so much design that goes into it. And it takes forever to develop them, right? I see this correlation between vehicle design and typeface design, where with a typeface being hundreds of drawings that need to fit together, and the vehicle is like hundreds of sculptures that need to fit together. So I think there's that nice overlap between industrial design and type design in particular. But also, like you pointed out, is that, cars have this unique set of user interface and user experience, kind of challenges kind of baked in, right? Like no other products have windshield wipers or headlights or, kind of all these kind of unique features that vehicles have, as opposed to a kiosk, right, at the airport or something. It's a different user experience, UI model. So, but I think that there's so much art and design that goes into vehicles.
In that way, yes. Like you said, it's like a very enormous thing. You don't ever expect to have so much behind it, because it's an enormous thing. Typefaces are just like that. It's a file, yes, but you don't know how much people worked on that so that you can accomplish. But just that one file gives you all the possibilities that it gives you. So yes, I agree. It's an enormous amount of work.
Yeah, it's true. It would look like the credits of a movie, right? It's just like hundreds of people that have worked on it. More so with cars, of course. But there is this, obviously a trend with more screens and bigger screens in cars and more software in general. And so usually where screens go, type goes with it. So tell me a little bit more about that transition of, the automotive industry getting more screens and how type fits there.
Well, I bet you have never thought about the idea of just sitting in your car, looking at your screens, saying, there was somebody doing this. Not only typography, but the design, the colors, the details, and the size of the screen. I don't know. There are lots of things and people working so that you can just sit down and be safe, so that it can give you so many things. Initially, screens were only for communicating very small things. Like, hey, there's a warning. There's something important that your vehicle needs to tell to you. That's why we're called human-machine interface, the area. It's because the machine is trying to talk to you and you are trying to say something to the machine. Before we had buttons that you can click them and the vehicle would do something. But well, trends are changing. Of course, we have big companies that are giving us a different perspective of what vehicles have to do and what the world is supposed to look like and how digital media is becoming. It's no longer the future, it's already happening. So where's the future going in the vehicles? So a thing that is happening right now is that we have more screens in the vehicles. You not only have one, but you have 2 or 3 or 4 screens within it. So what can we do so that we can give the users a better experience when you're inside your car? Right now you use a lot your mobile device, but what if your vehicle could give you that opportunity and there's nothing else that you have to do with an external device? And the other thing is globalization. First, we just needed to give support for English or Spanish or French. But now that you're producing a product to include other languages for lots of other people. And that's where typography emerges with the machine and how you can communicate and tell the computer, this is what I need. And at some point, vehicles will drive by themselves, but we are not there yet. We're still trying to tell the computer what to do. So while that happens right now, what we're doing is that you have to have an interaction with this. So if you miss the warnings that the vehicle is giving you, the car will leave you in the middle of nowhere. That's a thing that can happen. Or worse, if there was something very important that you cannot read, you can even have a car crash. And that's something that we cannot allow. The most important part there is safety.
Yeah, it's very interesting too. And I think one of the opportunities with these screens is just the amount of flexibility that you have, right? If it were just analog instrument cluster, whatever, you only have so much real estate that you can devote to that much information coming from the car. So these screens really just allow flexibility for the car to show you relevant information and timely information, like you said. I want to keep talking about this idea of safety and the ergonomics of the car, and like glance time is a big deal. So tell me a few more details maybe of how you might balance something like type that is large in a car, maybe a speedometer or, some other things. And there's so much hierarchy there. Where do you begin?
Right now, what I can tell you is the risk of not complying with the legibility standards is higher than in any other screen. So we need to follow several standards. For example, there is a document in the US called NHTSA.
The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, also known as NHTSA, doesn't want you to get into a car crash. And you know what? I don't want you to either. That's why I've teamed up.
That's a document that gives you recommendations of what you're supposed to use in a screen when you're in movement. So you have to meet those requirements. So maybe other companies use it as a reference, maybe they don't, but we do. We do use it as a standard. So this document tells you that at the distance that you are, it's 80 centimeters from the screen. Normally, that distance, you need to have 4 millimeters as the minimum of any text that you need to read. So we need to meet that because you need to read that. So the other thing that we tend to do is never to use light or very thin strokes. So light typography, ultra light, light italic, they look beautiful, but we cannot use that for body text. Also, we cannot use bold because at some point, something very thin and something very thick also can have problems in legibility. So we tend to be using always regular medium fonts. That's part of it.
Well, I think one of the unique challenges of vehicles is that they are like the definition of durable goods. Like if you think about a washing machine, it will last 10 or 20 years. A car will last longer. So this idea of like designing or choosing a computer and designing software for something that is going to survive for 30 years, it is really a unique challenge. It takes so long to design and develop a car that by the time it gets manufactured, some of those decisions are already 3 years old. Whereas in the smartphone era, Apple or Google can push an update in a week and it changes that. And yeah, of course, Tesla accelerated that adoption and popularity of, over-the-air updates. And I think that's a very important piece to software in cars.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest challenges that we have had, the user expectation, just like you mentioned. It's not the same thinking, hey, this is what we want to do, this is where we're trying to go, but the user is who will tell us, this is what I want. Because, like you said, it's a big machine. It takes a lot of people, a lot of effort to just do one of that things. So if it takes time, that's fine. We will take time to do it and to give you a comfortable machine, a safe machine, and something that looks trendy. It has been a challenge, but I think that we've managed to accomplish it.
Yeah, I think so. And there is really just exciting work coming out of Ford in general, I think. Even just the Mustang Mach-E and the new Broncos are just exceptional designs. And both of those are using the Sync 4 software. And so there's economies there where, you're having multiple cars using the same OS, basically. So every vehicle will have some unique details and stuff, but there is some economies there.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back to type in cars and typefaces in cars and user expectations and an idea of customizations. So with the Bronco, it has these different off-road driving modes and stuff. And there's all these different colors and animations. And in some cases, there could be different type to kind of reflect these moods. As a user, I want the car to kind of match my mood.
Do you like mud? Okay, then go there. You like snow? Go there. Do you like doing things in and around the water? Great.
Yeah, like putting the car into sport mode and it turns orange and it looks a certain way. I think a really cool and powerful way to use the software and the screens in the car to change the experience.
I think that there are different brands within the brands. Right now, Ford is Ford and Lincoln, but inside we have lots of sub-brands right now. Mustang is one of it. We have a performance car, which is the Ford GT. Of course, looks very different. United Sans is the typeface that we're using for that, and it's the only vehicle that uses it. So it looks different. The Mustang, we have the sport mode. And when you turn that on, maybe in some cases, it changes to a different typeface. From a regular style to a regular italic or light italic style. And that can make the whole difference. Like you said, the idea is to not only give the user one thing, but if you don't like this, you can choose between this and that. And just like your mobile device does it right now, you can change your background. And type is helping us to accomplish it.
It's really like the superpower of type, right? Where typeface changes the mood of whatever content there is. So just like you said, if you make it italic, it looks faster. And so even if someone is not conscious of that thing, they feel it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very small, subtle things that you can do with typography, even within, a very kind of rigid interface, like you said, that has a lot of rules. A little bit goes a long way.
People tend to think that you need to make very big changes so that it looks very different. And that's not true. Sometimes you only need to be very subtle. And that's it. You from a bold and regular size of something, you can look at and it feels truckish somehow. Mm-hmm. And then you use a condensed version of that in a regular style and italic, and it looks faster somehow. We also use color as part of it. The background is very important. Sometimes you don't think about the background. You think, if you have like black letters in a white background, it will never feel exactly the same as if you're using a black background or a gray background, a blue background. It changes. So we're trying to use some other things along with typography, and it will make you feel different. And I will also 3D is coming, and how typography is mixing with the 3D dimensions. And that's very interesting. So we are always playing to try to make you feel different, even if it's your same vehicle.
Yeah, this idea of background colors and the overall contrast of the light and dark. It reminds me of a highway road system, at least in the United States, where it's usually a green background with white type, and there's different typefaces like Highway Gothic, I think, and Clearview was kind of the newer one. And so they did these studies with spacing and how much of the light is reflected, because it makes it look fuzzy, right? And so if the letters are too close together, the light reflecting off of it will make it harder to read. I think all of that is about viewing distance and reading comfort, or readability.
Spacing.
Yeah, I think those principles apply in vehicle. And there's usually a light and dark mode, right? So when you're driving at night, you don't get the white background, you get a dark background. And
exactly.
So some of those things are just it's more comfortable. And if you had that white background driving at night, the screen would like be blinding you because it would be just so much light in the cabin.
Sometimes it's not only the letter itself, but the space around it. Normally, people never think about the space that goes around the letters. It's super important. If you put just a word and you put a lot of space between it, it will be very difficult for you to read. If you have less space or if it's very tight, you're also not going to read it. So you have to go to the middle point where you can read it and it looks comfortable, and that's fine. And the use of capital letters there is very important. In our vehicles, it's not the same. You cannot just use capital letters for everything because that's more difficult to read. So you tend to use camel case, or if not camel case, the first letter is always in uppercase and then everything else is lowercase so that you can read it fast. Spacing is one of the most important parts of typography. It could make the whole paragraph or letter be legible or be completely illegible. And it depends on the distance that you are from the text that you're reading and the size of the text. So tracking and intercharacter spacing is size specific. You normally have to use a different space between letters depending on the size. We cannot use that as much as we would like in the screens because you use whatever is in the font itself, but you design it so that from the very beginning it's very legible. And it doesn't matter if you're using a big size or a very small font size, it could be readable. When you need to read that at a glance, those seconds are very critical. So we use something called camel case, which is capital letter, lowercase, or we just put the first letter in capital and everything else is lowercase. So I really wanted to mention that because it's very important and people should always take that into account when designing something.
Yeah, it's true. I think it's called the buma, which is like the shape of the word. And there's, in reading studies and stuff, they talk about the eye jumping from shape to shape. And that's very interesting. And of course, something like the idea of letter spacing or tracking, doesn't apply to every script, right? So if you're using Arabic that has a connecting script, you can't just track it out. It doesn't work quite the same way. So I think, back to translations, is like each script or each writing system has its own kind of legibility or readability, and each one kind of can be finessed in that certain way. And I just think it's amazing that you would be able to, choose your native script, in the vehicle. And I imagine that would increase reading comprehension, obviously, and the speed. Like, I'm imagining if I put myself into a car and the interface was in German, I would read much slower, right? So it's like,
exactly.
Not my native language, right? So having those languages available I can only just imagine just increases the user experience and satisfaction, I imagine, too.
And the work for us.
Yes.
It means a lot of extra work. And you never think that Thai, Arabic, they vertically, they use more space. And that Arabic cannot use tracking. That cannot happen because you have ligatures and everything is together. So when you have to translate into several languages and you have to use several and that can behave different, you have to mix them and you have to make it feel like it's part of the family. So you have to choose the correct style for each of them, the correct spacing for each of them. So it's a set. You don't normally think about Latin characters and that's it. You have to think about Korean, Chinese, Thai, Arabic. It makes it more complex. So it means so much work. And now imagine that we have Ford and we have Lincoln. So you have to think what can work for a Ford and what can work for a Lincoln. And you then have to divide your head and start thinking in two different sets that still feel part of a family and have similar metrics, similar height, similar space between the characters. Intercharacter spacing is so important. So you have to think outside the box, not only for one thing, but for everything. That's becoming more and more complex every time.
That's true. And I thinking of just the luxury brand, and most automakers in the world have a luxury brand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lexus is made by Toyota, and Porsche is owned by VW, and there's all of these kind of branches, and they share parts. They don't want you to know, but they share parts. But I think about like, yeah, you're right. Like, what would make this vehicle a Lincoln vehicle? And maybe it's the materials on the inside, but again, those luxury touches have to be reflected in the interface too. What is a more luxurious typeface? And, how do those other colors and sounds and animations and those kind of things, how can all of those things, reflect that kind of cohesive idea or the concept for that vehicle? As we talked about earlier, they can be very different. A sports car, an off-road car, a luxury car have different moods.
Totally true. And also, there are some new things coming. If you try to look at the new layout of how the Bronco looks like, it's slightly different of whatever Ford has been doing in the past years. And Mustang will come with something new as well. And that's something I really liked. I think that Terrance helped us be part of that project. So I would love to at some point really tell everybody what we did, because that's something that Monotype and Ford has been working. We both did a part of it, and it looks beautiful. I wanted to talk about something else that is very important doing typography for vehicles. You can have the best layout and the best design, and you can have the best typefaces and font files. But then, if your software is not capable of reading whatever you did, all the work from the ergonomics team, from the developers, from the layout designers, from the type specialists in Ford and in Monotype, translators, then it doesn't matter, because your software is not going to be able to display your text properly, to put everything in place. So that's another thing that I have discovered while I've been here in Ford. I've been here for 4 years by now. And the biggest problems that we have encountered all the time has to do with software. So rendering engines and shaping engines are things that you have to implement in your system so that your beautiful Arabic script and Korean script and Thai script display properly. Substitutions for some other scripts like Latin, those are more like, I would really like to see an F with an I that looks better than these other letters. So ligatures are something like alternates that you can use for aesthetic purposes. When it comes to Arabic and Thai, it's not for aesthetic purposes. It's for you to read it, and that's it.
Yeah, it's necessary.
It's necessary. So substitutions here become a very important part of the job. And if your shaping engine is not capable of reading those substitutions, those open type features that we think it's already there in my font, that's it, I don't have to do anything. If your system is not capable of reading those tables, you cannot display that properly. So I wanted to bring that out because normally people don't think about it. And that's almost 90% of my job is fixing those kind of things.
That's great. And I one of my questions was, what did you learn on the job that you didn't cover in university? And this sounds like this is it. Shaping engines. Yeah.
Yes, that's part of it. I mean, we understood how that works, but you think, that the computer is going to do it. I don't have to do anything at all.
Yeah.
But no, that's not true. You have to have a very good rendering engine, a very good shaping engine. So that's part of the things that I learned here.
I read earlier this year that Ford was going to transition to an automotive OS. It's very interesting because it's changing so fast. The competition is hot,
It is.
There's so much change happening so quickly.
Yeah, I don't think that we're the only company that's doing things to improve the user experience in the screens. I'm quite sure that there are lots of other companies doing it.
Of course.
I think that the very big difference that Ford did, and that surprised me, is that I think, and maybe if somebody else knows that this is not true, please let me know, because I know by far that this is the only company that has a team with type designers, specifically here to solve issues about legibility, about aesthetics, about how can you manage to make a car and a vehicle and a screen look better and make it functional. And now that we have this new challenge of every time we have more scripts and every time we have more languages, how can we solve everything at the same time and make it feel a family? That's the thing that I like the most. I don't think that there's another company that has taken that much accountability for legibility. And that's why I love being here in the company. I really feel part of Ford. I love my job right now because I have the opportunity to work very closely with very big machines and complex machines and engineering designs, and they are giving me the attention that I never thought that somebody, a big company as Ford, can give to something that has to do with design and type.
So, Hanne, we talked a little bit about the transformation to electrification and moving away from internal combustion engines into electric cars, and that transition will take decades. But there's two other pieces that are kind of happening at the same time, and that is autonomy and connectivity. And I think these two pieces in particular are married together, because if you have the idea of a self-driving car, which is, there's different levels of autonomy, right? So like automatic emergency braking, where the car will brake for you if there's an emergency or something. That's a certain level. And so part of this idea of cars driving themselves and having so much software, they need a lot of data too in order to do that. So maps and traffic, or all these other things that the car has to process. So connectivity, meaning like the car has a modem and it's able to download data in the same way that your smartphone does. And these two ideas of autonomy and connectivity kind of also increase all of these like business models, right? One of these kind of futuristic, business models is fleets of autonomous taxis, and renting a car, and instead of owning it, you're just paying, per mile. Tell me what you hope happens in the future.
What I can tell you is that right now there are 5 levels of autonomy. The first one, or zero automation, is no automation at all. Ford right now, in most of the vehicles, are giving you level 1, which is the driver assistance. In this kind of vehicles, machines are trying to give you something so that it can help you, like cruise control, similar things like that. But there's another level, and that's where we're right now. That is level 2, advanced driver assistance systems, ADAS. So we are right now there in level 2, and what we are heading to is level 3. This is conditional automation. It doesn't mean that you can just leave it out and the car will do whatever. It doesn't work like that. Even if it's driving on its own, you have to be touching the vehicle so that it knows that you're paying attention. We are working on that part of automation. The future, of course, is going to level 4 and level 5, which is high automation and full automation. In high automation, the vehicle performs all driving tasks under specific circumstances. And still, there are some places where it can tell you, please, now it's your part. Please drive, because this section is very complicated. So even if I have lots of cameras everywhere, I will not do it. So you will have to pay attention and do it on your own. And full automation, that's a feature. The movies that show you that you're just looking at your cell phone, you're playing, doing things, talking to your pals, and the vehicle is driving on its own, that is full automation. It's challenging, so it takes time to do things like that. Even Tesla is still working on conditional in high automation. We're there. So in 5 years, I don't know. Of course, we are trying and attempting to go to level 3 and 4. That's where we're heading. And I think that we can do it for sure. That it's challenging, but it's something that we're already working on.
It's very close. And I think, like you mentioned earlier, just with safety being such a huge priority with something like these high level of automation, is that it has to be perfect in order for it to work, right? If it fails once, that's too many times. From what I understand is that certain levels of autonomy are not allowed in certain parts of the world, or that different countries have different rules about vehicles in general. And so I think that is
about having cameras everywhere. That's part of the deal.
Yes, exactly. And I think what's especially happening now, I mean, with Tesla and GM's Super Cruise and Ford's Blue Cruise is this super cruise control, and that is these driver assist technologies. But I think using highways is a really good starting point, because highway driving experiences are way more predictable than a city street.
AI is here to stay. So we have to deal with that.
Yeah.
It is a matter of us giving the correct rules so that AI works for us and that it does it correctly. What does it take to have all these levels of autonomy information? You need to know how drivers are driving, where are they going, at what speed, the places where they are. And obviously, at the very beginning, it will be difficult because it's going to be just a couple of vehicles recording information, then two, then three, then 1,000, then 1,000,000. And the more vehicles that give you information, the more you will know exactly how to get to this level 3, 4, and 5 of autonomy. And that's what it will take for everybody to set the rules of how is it going to work. But because of course it can be used for, like anything else, for the wrong purposes. So it's just
don't take a nap.
Exactly.
Yeah, it reminds me too, I mean, we talked a little bit about how long cars stay on the road. So if you had a highway full of autonomous cars that were all connected to each other and they were talking to each other, it would be easy. But you don't. You're not going to have that. So you would have one autonomous car surrounded by older cars.
And maybe not only automobiles. Maybe what if bikes also had this technology, and people in bikes can give you information of how fast people in bikes are going, where are they exactly, the places where they are normally. So the idea of the company is not only to think about cars, but mobility in general. So mobility means people walking, means people in bikes, means people in vehicles. So we have to think
the big picture.
Exactly. We have to go with the big picture. Every time we have more machines in our lives, and we don't speak in code, and they don't speak in our languages. So how can we communicate with them correctly and in the best way possible in so many languages? So designers have room for a lot of investigation to understand better how to make typography more legible, even more legible, how screens are getting better in resolution. So at some point, hinting could possibly be something that we will not need anymore. So let's think what else is changing around the globe that can give us the opportunity of having new work expectations and challenges. That's the thing that I would really like people to think about. How important is this? Everywhere.
That's beautiful. And I think that in the past, a graphic designer might have only done a certain specialized thing. And I think I tend to see more generalist designers today that are trained in UI and UX can encompass so many different things. And I think the designers of the future are going to be tasked with things that have not been done before, would have to use design and leverage design history to come up with new solutions in new places that we just haven't imagined before. And I think transportation industry is a big one. And just to add a few closing thoughts, these ideas of fashion and utility and technology, they will always have an influence on the things that we design, either a vehicle or a typeface. And especially fashion and technology too, but they morph in ways that sometimes are not really, visible in front of us, and that I'm constantly surprised by fashion and technology and how design follows that.
Of course. And in
Great.
general, in the history of graphic design is always influenced by all the other arts, architecture, fashion, music. And now what is happening is that technology is part of our reality and of our time. So how all these new things, how AI and new automation in vehicles, how all these things are going to change our era and how we're going to do new things. Because I think that we are in that transition. We are in a moment in time that new things are happening and technology is determining so many things. So how designers are thinking ahead, all these challenges that sooner or later will come to us. Screens are staying, AI is staying, new technologies. So what are we doing to think ahead and do it great, do it better, and always think about communication first? I mean, we love making things beautiful, and of course that's why art exists. But in regard of design, how do we keep communicating correctly? Because that's the biggest challenge, and that's the best thing we can do. Always try to communicate the best way possible.
Well said. Well, it was so nice interviewing you today, Hanne. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for allowing me to be a fanboy today. And I love talking about type and cars, and I could do it all day.
And thank you, of course, for inviting me to this conversation. It was amazing, and let's do it again. Okay. And you should come to Mexico, please.
Okay, I need it. I'll be there.
Thank you for listening. If you want to learn more about Hanne and the work she's doing for Ford, look for a link to our blog post in the show notes of this episode. You can also visit monotype.com/podcast to read about our prior guests. If you've been enjoying our podcast, please go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify to rate and review this episode. If you really like us, subscribe to the show and share with your friends. Creative Characters is a product of Monotype, Christopher Sound, and Marie Tabarez. We'll be back with more episodes soon. Take care.